So when you're talking about who should have access to your data, you have to make some considerations as a business. Now, the smaller you are, the more you have to trust your employees. We know this just by talking to business owners. You're growing, you're learning together. Oftentimes they're collaborative partners, so they have access to quite a bit. So no one wants to talk badly about employees. No one wants to create a paranoid atmosphere. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting as a business owner is you should have a pretty good idea of who you're working with and for, or who's working for you, and what kind of person you'd like. And you are going to consider their background a little bit. I recommend, as best you can, try to get a sense of where they were before you and what they operated on. You're going to make those decisions based on how you want to, but just be aware. Educate yourself, because you need to protect your business. The second one is their disposition. How do they make you feel? Is this someone who's consistently reliable for you? Is this someone who maybe kind of loses track of things, or they get flaky, or they get frazzled when they're on the road and they start to get a little sloppy with process? Think about that as you begin to talk about what you want them to have access to. And then the most important thing, more than all of the other things, is what is their job role? And if their job role does not require them to have access to certain data, they should not have access to certain data. That's how you protect yourself. Now, there's two ways that protects you. Number one, against the insider threat, right? The idea that a disgruntled employee or someone masquerading as an employee digitally gets into your system and they begin to try and grab, steal, change, alter, destroy data. Well, they're only going to have access to what little piece of the pie they see. And so that's a control right there. But the other piece of where this really protects you is that when you begin to separate out all of your job roles and you put parts of your data in certain directions, to an attacker from the outside looking in, it becomes very difficult for me to understand which place I need to attack. And that means I either have to attack all of them, which increases the risk I'm going to be seen and discovered before I can do anything. And then also, if I put all this time, effort, and money into breaking into you, if I don't get what I want, then I just wasted all that time, effort, and money. So I'm going to go somewhere where I have an easier chance to do it. So when you begin to put these barriers up, in the military a long time ago, they called it the castle defense method, and then they changed it because the government likes to change its names all the time, and they called it defense in depth. But the idea is, at every turn, you try to put a barrier up between the attacker and yourself. So they have to just keep jumping through hoops to get deeper and deeper into you. And that can become a discouragement on its own. Trusting your employees is important, but protecting your data is more important. You started this business, you operate this business, it's your lifeblood. And the less people who can see, change, and use that important information, the better. A person's access to data should be determined by two main governing considerations. You need to have trust with that individual. That doesn't mean that all the people that work for you need to have the same level of trust, depending on the size of your organization and what they do. But they should have a job-specific need for why they have access to that information. And what I say about this is consider your ability to trust individuals as you hire them into positions with access. This is no longer, and now I know right now after COVID, this world has changed. Finding people in general to fill positions is very difficult. I understand that everyone is struggling across all the industries to fill positions. But I would still beg you to take a moment and think about, as you're going through your hiring process, would I trust this person with this aspect of my business? And if you've mitigated your risk, and we'll talk about some of the ways to tighten down roles and stuff like that, when you've mitigated your risk by limiting access to certain areas, it makes it easier to do that if you have a hiring need that's really high critical. And as you ask interviewees questions, find questions that help you learn what you can trust them with, and really try to get through that disposition process. The reality is, and there's another slide where I talk about it. A surprising amount of cyber incidents are actually from insider threats. And that's something that I never thought I'd have to consider as much as I came into this industry a long time ago. I came from a military background. No one ever wanted to talk about, we talked about the insider threat, but the idea was like, you trust everybody next to you, right? And what you learn, unfortunately, in life is that when people are pushed in a certain direction or certain stresses hit, some people make really bad decisions. And then also, some people with no malice at all make mistakes. And so you need to think about this because your business is online. So the principle of least privilege, I talked about it and I wanted to talk about it again. This is probably the most important takeaway here, the idea that if they don't need access to it, they shouldn't have. So what does that look like? How do you withdraw access? Well, depending on your system, there's technical ways to do it. So Microsoft's infrastructure, for instance, allows you the ability to group your employees by job role. And that group will come with certain permissions. So like O365, you can assign them, so Office 365, I'm sorry, by Microsoft, which is very common. And I can't address all of the solutions because I know we have such a diverse group of people here, and I'm sorry for that. But if you work with your IT group or your vendor for your particular solution, you'll find that almost all of them offer the ability to group employees by role within your digital landscape. And with that role, limit permissions to only certain aspects of your network. If you're not already doing this, this is the first step you do. This is the first thing you do is begin to pare it down. Now, that can be a bit of a learning process. You definitely, especially if you're a smaller business, you can over-limit them and then find out they do need access to something. But what's important here is that if you do that, they have to ask you, and you will understand why they have access to that data, right? So now it's that awareness piece that we talked about earlier, knowing where your data is and how it's being used and how it's moving. One hand washes the other, and everything becomes cyclical as we go through that.